Welcome to another interesting tutorial where I'll be showing you how I made this gorgeous palazzo jumpsuit. If you're joining me for the first time today, you're welcome to my channel. Please consider subscribing and don't forget to activate the notification bell, as this will notify you each time I post a new video. So I made this with 4 yards of crepe, or you can use chiffon or any soft fabric that would bring out the flowing effect. So on my pattern paper, I have marked out my vertical dimensions. Okay, if you followed my previous video on basic bodice pattern, you should understand what I did here. The link to that video will be attached to the description of this one. So for this, I'll quickly run through a few explanations on what I've marked out here. So this is my shoulder line. I measured 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and for the neckline I have used 3.5 for the width and 4 inches for the depth of my neckline. This is the armhole line for the front pattern. Remember, we'll have to come in to create the front armhole. If you follow that video, you will understand everything about this. Then this is the bust line. Here is my under bust, and this is the waistline. Here I marked my hip line. Okay, so on my basic bodice pattern, the measurements stops at the hip line. So now for this palazzo, I've extended it a little bit to mark my knee length. It's very simple to measure this. Just run the tape through from your shoulder, from the nape of your shoulder to your kneecap, and you will get this knee line. Then this is the full length of the palazzo, and it measures 62 inches. I actually made it 62 because I would like it to flow. My actual full length is 61, so you can add about 2 inches or 1 or even 3 inches depending on how you would want it to flow, how long you would want it to be. So I added 1.5 inches for the hemming allowance. Okay, that's what you can see there. So far that's the dimensions I've marked here. So just go straight to draft the palazzo pattern. We'll impute the horizontal dimensions on these lines I've marked. Okay, let me also mention that I left out 4 inches on the center front. Okay, this will help me to extend my crotch for the palazzo. As we go on, you understand how this comes in handy. Now for the bust line, the bust point measurement is 44 inches. That's the bust circumference. And since this pattern portrays the 1/4 of the entire palazzo, okay, so that's like dividing the circumference into 4. So I'll be marking everything in 1/4 of the entire circumference. So the bust circumference is 40 inches, and I'm going to mark 10 inches here, which is 1/4 of the entire bust circumference. Now the waistline, the waist circumference is 36 inches, and 36 divided by 4 is 9 inches. I've marked that there as well. The hip circumference is 44 inches, and 44 divided by 4 is 11 inches. I've marked that here as well. Now to derive my crotch depth, I'm going to divide the hip circumference by 4. Okay, so dividing 44 by 4, I get 11 inches. So I'm going to apply 11 inches on the crotch depth if I'm making a normal pant, you know. So fine, but because I'm making a palazzo, I'm taking this measurement from my waistline to the crotch depth. Okay, so from this waistline, instead of applying 11 inches, I'll add extra 3 inches. That's because I want it to be free. You can even add up to 3.5 or even 4 inches to bring out the beauty of this jumpsuit. And I also apply my 11 inches hip circumference down here. Okay, so I've applied 11 inches at this point, and this becomes my crotch depth. So let me just connect this point to my crotch depth. So I'll now mark this as my crotch depth. Now I'll have to add a little extension to this to create out my thigh circumference. So the measurement around my thigh is 26 inches. So I'm going to divide that 26 inches by 2. Okay, I divided all the measurements above this place, I divided by 4, but at the crotch depth I'm dividing the thigh circumference by 2. Okay, don't forget that. So now my thigh circumference is 26, so dividing 26 by 2 is 13 inches. So I'm going to apply that on this point. This has created a crotch line for me here, so there's an extension on the center front to create my crotch extension. Okay, so that's just the point I'm going to mark here. So if you measure this, is 2 inches. Okay, so it's like 2 inches extension at the front. Now I'll use my French curve to curve this into the actual center front. I hope you're following what I'm doing. It's actually very easy to achieve this. So I'll now connect this point to the hem of my jumpsuit. Okay, so it's going to be a straight line from this point to that hem. So I'll just add 1 inch for ease allowance on the crotch and on the hip line. Okay, so I'm just adding ease allowance on the hip line and on the crotch. Then I'll connect a straight line from those 2 points down to the hem of the pants. So now just link up these points. So with this, we can see that the front pattern is almost ready. This pattern is going to have a side dart. Okay, so and the side darts, to apply the side dart, we'll just measure 2 inches from the bust line downwards. Okay, so this 2 inches will be for our side dart. Then we'll also apply our bust span. The bust span is the distance between the 2 nipples. Okay, so it's also called the nipple to nipple measurement, and the bust span here is 9 inches, so we're applying half of that here to form our apex. Okay, I've created the apex down here, which is 4.5 inches, and I'm going ahead to apply the same 4.5 across the entire length of this pattern. Okay, so I'll just connect those points with my ruler. This will help me to create my dart. Okay, so this is the original point for my dart. So since I'm using a side dart for this, I'll just measure ½ inch towards the armhole. That's on the bust point. From the apex, I've measured 1 inch towards the armhole, and I'm going to connect that point to the 2 inches I marked below the bust line. So this is what I'm going to be using for my side dart. I'll quickly shade that out, and so that's it for my side dart. So now I'll extend this point I marked. I'll extend it even beyond this point. To add the fullness I want. Okay, so I've just extended that point down to the hem of my pattern. Now that we're done with the front pattern, we're going to be creating out our back pattern on this same pattern paper. But the difference what we're going to use to mark the difference is to use a different color of marker. Okay, so I'm using a black marker to create out my back pattern. First, we're going to be doing the neckline. Okay, so for the neckline, I'm going to use 1.5 inch for the back neckline. So, but I'm using the same width for the back neckline, and I'm going to link these points up. So you can as well use 1 inch for this back neckline. I'm linking it up like so. Then the armhole, you know that the back armhole, you don't usually come in the way you do for the front one. So I'm marking at the exact point I marked my shoulder line. So that's for my back armhole. So I'm going to mark it in from this point. Okay, so the back pattern will have a zipper allowance, which I'm going to use 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance. You can actually use 1 inch for this, but it depends on whatever works for you. Okay, so I'm using 1.5 for this. So I'm going to extend that neckline to that point I marked my 1.5, and that will be for my zipper allowance. I'll apply this on the entire length of this pattern. Okay, I'll apply it to the crotch area of this pattern or to the hip line. Now I've extended the 1.5 inches to my hip line. Next up, I'm going to be adding my crotch extension. For the back pattern, I'm going to add extra 2 inches or 2.5 to the crotch I marked earlier. Okay, so I've added that to this point, and that's it for my back crotch extension. So I'm going to now connect this point to the hip line. So I'll mark from that point to the bottom of my pant as well. And I'm also using the black pen just to differentiate between the front and the back pattern. So basically that's the only difference between the front and the back pattern. So first, let's just cut this out, then I'll show you how the fullness will be achieved on the hem of this jumpsuit. So I'm cutting this part as well, the straight line I marked for my waistline. Okay, so this line is actually connecting to the butt line. This will help me to extend my create the fullness I want for this jumpsuit. Okay, please make sure you watch this video to the end, as I'm going to be sharing some tips on how to go about sewing this jumpsuit. Okay, so I've cut this to the bust point, and now I'm going to align the side dart like so. So with my tape, my sticky tape, I'm going to just stick that point in place. So we'll just cut this on the fabric, and the fabric will be on fold. We'll use this pattern to cut both front and back, and you'll agree with me that this table will not be able to accommodate that if I'll have to show you in details how I cut it. So we'll just have to move to a wider space and cut this out. So my fabric is now placed on fold, and that's the pattern right on the fabric. So first we're going to be cutting out the back pattern before we now cut the front. So guys, that's how to cut the bottom. Okay, you just cut across the slanted part, or the part that will be spread out. You just cut across it, and it will create that fullness that we want. Then that's the shoulder line and the armhole. I've added 1 centimeter seam allowance. Then on the sides, I've also added ½ inch. You can use 1 inch seam allowance or 1 centimeter, whichever works for you. So that's basically what I did here. You can see I've cut out the back pattern. So now to cut the front pattern, we need to eliminate the zipper allowance and the crotch extension. Okay, then we also need to cut out the armhole for the back pattern. You know that our red lines that we marked are for the front pattern, so we'll just cut out those back parts. We'll just cut through the red lines, okay, and this will just eliminate our zipper allowance. Then the neckline as well, we'll have to extend it at to the original point where we marked for our front pattern. So that's basically the difference between this and the front pattern. So we'll just do those alterations and then cut the front pattern. On the back pattern, I measured 11 inches from the nape of the shoulder line towards the waistline and cut that out. So that's what you're seeing here, and I'm going to be using this to replace with the back pattern. Okay, so I'm cutting black chiffon to attach to the back pattern. Then for the front panel, I cut out some bias strip, and I'll be using this on the neckline and armhole. So let's start sewing this garment. The first thing I want to do is to join the two front panels. These are the front panels of this garment, and I'm going to be sewing along this line at the center front. From the crotch extension, I'm going to sew it by 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way to the neckline. After joining the two center front panels, I've gone ahead to attach my bias strips on the armhole and the neckline. So you can see the piping I've done. Okay, so now we'll set this aside and work on the back pattern. On the back pattern as well, I've sewn the neckline of my black fabric and the armhole as well. So after sewing it, I turned it the other way around. So I turned it inside out and gave it a good press. Once you've attached the yoke to the back patterns, it's time to sew your zipper. So you can just add your invisible zipper at this point. Then it goes and stops somewhere around here. Then you now run your straight stitch to close up the crotch extension. Okay, so that's the back panel. Okay, I've closed it up to the crotch extension, as you can see. So the next thing to do now is to align the front and the back panels on the shoulder. So that's the front panel, and on our back panel we place them, then align the shoulders, okay, like so, and sew them up. Okay, but we're not just going to place it like this to sew. We're going to pass through the zipper allowance that we created. So we're passing through this side where the zipper goes, and we're going to align that the shoulder point and sew from the inside. So the next thing to do now is to sew up the inseam, which is from the hem to the crotch, then to the other side of the bottom. We'll now sew the sides. Okay, that's the side seam of our garment. Then we'll hem. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please like and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Bye.